The election reform bill known as HR 1 or the For the People Act is incredibly popular with the electorate. It would expand voting rights. It would ensure that people who want to vote will easily be able to do so. But the people who aren't so happy about this are the individuals who love doling out dark money in order to bribe our politicians. And so I'd say the Koch brothers, but really now it's Koch brother has come out talking about how this needs to be defeated, and they're already engaging in focus groups to figure out just how to do that. Now, the New Yorker was able to obtain audio of a private conference call that took place. And this conference call included all sorts of conservative dark money groups, also an aide to Mitch McConnell. And they were expressing their frustration over the popularity of this legislation and what they can do to defeat it. Without further ado, let's go to the first video, which features an individual who works for a Koch-funded organization. I don't want to give too much away. Let's take a look at what he has to say and I'll fill in the blanks.
Most people have never heard of the phrase HR 1. So over 60% of people just had no idea what we were talking about when we said, have you ever heard of HR 1? However, when presented with a very neutral description of HR 1, people were generally supportive. And the most worrisome part, which Grover mentioned at the very beginning of his presentation, is that conservatives were actually as supportive as the general public was when they read the neutral description of HR 1. And so, as I have here in my don't slide, this isn't just a matter of like finding conservatives and then activating them on this in a public way. There's a very large chunk of conservatives who are supportive of these types of efforts.
So he's not celebrating the fact that even conservatives are supportive of this legislation. That is seen as a huge problem throughout the entirety of the audio that the New Yorker was able to obtain. And the person that you heard there is Kyle McKenzie. He's a research director, the research director over at the Koch-run advocacy group known as Stand Together. Don't be fooled by its sweet sounding name. It's a terrible organization and they want to ensure that corporate interests and the powerful elite in this country have more of a say in our democracy than you do. And so conservatives do like the legislation because it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. The fact that we have dark money funding campaigns, the fact that we have legalized bribery in this country, the corruption is something that upsets both sides of the aisle. And so they're trying to find ways to kind of outmaneuver the popular messaging that comes along with this type of legislation. And it wouldn't just get rid of dark money. This legislation calls for the public financing of campaigns, which is a really, really big deal. And that goes in addition to expanding voting rights, ensuring that people are easily registered to vote if they're eligible to vote, and what have you. But before I get to more sound featuring this McKenzie character, I wanted to hear some of what you had to say about this, Aida.
It's funny because I watched Judas and the Black Messiah early, and I realized that Fred Hampton was only 21 years old when they killed him. And people were like, yeah, he was trying to unite the people. He was trying to get the people all black and the Rainbow Coalition. The reality is that they killed him because he was coming for capitalism, right? And anybody who comes from capitalism, Jesse Jackson has been talking about anti-racism for forever, and he's still here. Fred Hampton at 21 was murdered by the US government. And I just think about how these agendas, they're so important to those interests because they really do manipulate everything that happens in our environments. And why, of course, racism is bad, white supremacy is at play. It is a function of capitalism. And then when you think about this, these are the people who don't care about the quality of your water or your air, who don't care that the laws are, rigged and not in your favor, and that they have, labor, this free labor that continues the slavery legacy of this country. So when we talk about these things, it's so deep and so it's so much invested in where our communities and how we live our lives, all of the people who are not in that top 1%, that this kind of stuff should really move us to really understand who we're voting for and what they're voting for in government. And it's not just about the president, but that is why it's so important to understand who you're putting in those seats to go represent you in Washington and who represent you in local government.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I really appreciate about this story and the fact that the New Yorker was able to obtain this leaked audio is that it gives you a clear sense of how the sausage is made, really. Because don't think that you have these incredibly brilliant lawmakers who are super strategic and they sit around thinking analytically about how they're going to push through some legislation. No, that's not how it works. There's all sorts of gross corporate-like behavior happening in our political world, and that includes the focus groups. That includes more of what you're about to hear from Mackenzie in the clips that we're about to have you listen to, because it's not about having a democratic process where the will of the people reigns supreme. This is a conversation about breaking the will of the people or manipulating people to think that legislation that would actually give them the ability to be part of this democratic process is awful, it's terrible. And so what are they thinking about? What did they find through these focus groups that they engaged in? Well, Mackenzie is about to share more details about his findings in this next clip. Take a listen.
Don't get into a fight in HR1 where you engage with the other side, where they have the talking points. HR1 stops billionaires from buying elections. Unfortunately, we found that is a winning message for both the general public and also conservatives. That simple message, but far and away was resonated with people, and when they had to compare that message versus tons of other ones, they were most persuaded by that, and they found that to be most convincing and most, it riled them up the most.
Wow, congratulations, Kyle. I guess that's why they pay you the big bucks. We're surprised. We did a focus group and we found out that people don't like money in politics. Wow, congratulations, Aida.
What's funny is that you and I, we've talked about this stuff before, and we know who the real enemies are, and who really gets off when we struggle, because it's so profitable. The struggle of the people is so profitable for those at the top. And this gives people insight into all the little moving parts that are in play to keep you oppressed and suppressed and frustrated and hungry and broke. And just the reminder that even though the American people have suffered horribly as a result of this pandemic, those people have gotten richer as a result of this pandemic. And we need to really take all of this into account, because while we're having these culture wars and these fights on Instagram and on Twitter, those are the people who are benefiting from it. It is so profitable for them at the top. We need to really realign ourselves and in this fight, because the quality of our lives are getting worse while theirs gets better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And understand that the context of this conference call that they're having is this necessity to manipulate not Democratic voters. They consider Democratic voters a lost cause. They're having a conversation about manipulating conservative voters specifically. That's what this is about. So what were more of the findings from this focus group? Let's take a listen.
Perhaps most sadly, on the don'ts column here, the last number 5, and this is a major reason we undertook this research, was just to simply test whether the phrase cancel culture could be attached to HR1, and using that to motivate the right would be helpful. Unfortunately, at least in our max diff exercise, where we had messages against other messages, this concept of cancel culture didn't really resonate with people. So our phrase was something very akin to HR1 is the left's attempt to use cancel culture to cancel conservatives, something like that. And it really ranked in the bottom.
Dude, political corruption has its, I don't want to sound too optimistic because I'm not, but political corruption, I feel, has its days numbered because, again, we're talking about conservatives here, right? And conservatives have been propagandized by GOP lawmakers regarding cancel culture endlessly, and they're not buying it. I mean, they believe that cancel culture is a problem, right? But they aren't buying it in the context of dark money or money in politics, corrupting politicians, bribery that essentially takes us out of the equation as individual voters, really. They're not buying the argument. They're like, oh, you're gonna bring up cancel culture. You're gonna bring up cancel culture to try to manipulate me into thinking that money in politics is a great thing. No, not buying it, right? So I love that because it also, to me, reveals that even conservative voters seem to be increasingly aware of class as opposed to other identifying characteristics, right? So rather than see their billionaire conservatives as their homies, they're like, they're not like me. My situation's a little different, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, it is. And you know what one of the things that I think about is that a lot of people who are conservative in their views, it comes from, their upbringing, religion, and where they come from, and they really believe those things. They believe in those things. They believe in whatever their religious doctrine that they've accepted to guide their lives. And they are noticing that these people are manipulating those things for profit. And yeah, there are a lot of people who want to identify with Donald Trump who lack education and or not just Donald Trump, because I don't even think Donald Trump is a conservative. You can't be a conservative when you smashing, porn stars and you got all these baby mamas, because that's not in alignment with conservative views. And that's just not me trying to, that's just true. But I just think that it's important that people realize that their personal beliefs, their specific values are being manipulated by these people for gain. And I'm glad that people are starting to wake up, because those people really believe those things. They believe in those things, and it's attached to their Jesus or whatever it is that they believe. And now here these guys and people come along to say, you know what? Check this out. And they're like, nah, we're good. We're good. And I'm glad.
I am too. Now, I'm also aware of the kind of fight that billionaire conservatives are willing to engage in. And I don't want anyone to think that this is gonna be an easy battle. Of course, Republican lawmakers are gonna try to fight this tooth and nail. Democrats in the Senate specifically have become more willing to at least discuss reforming the filibuster in order to pass this type of legislation in the Senate. Remember, as the legislative filibuster stands today, they would need 60 votes total in the Senate in order to pass this type of legislation. So the first order of business would really need to be filibuster reform, or my preference would be to do away with the filibuster altogether. But this is a must-pass piece of legislation for Democrats if they wish to have any type of political future, because as we've seen over and over again, as we're seeing right now in states like Georgia, Republicans are doing anything and everything necessary to game the system to their advantage to ensure that they get the votes, and anyone who wants to vote for Democrats will have a difficult time doing so in some of these battleground states. We do have one more clip to get to. Let's take a look at that, and I'll give you some more details about what HR 1 includes.
The one message that seemed actually to work, and I know this won't be intellectually satisfying to a lot of people on this call who really want to engage in this fight. The message that seemed to work, right, was simply that Congress shouldn't be focusing on this right now. Our country has much bigger fish to fry at this moment, which I think we can all agree with. And so the two examples we used were healthcare and the economy, right? There's still an unbelievable amount of people out of work in the country. Congress should focus on getting people back to work, not on these kind of niche donor disclosure type of endeavors we're working on. Obviously, we don't have the luxury of maybe making that statement because we do need to refute the other side's point of view. But from a mass communications point of view, that is one of the most effective messages.
Okay, great. So we know what actually did resonate with the participants of this focus group, the allegation that there are other fish to fry. But what the Democratic Party needs to do a better job in, and they need to be prepared ahead of time. I mean, they just got a giant hint about what this campaign is going to be about. They need to have a message ready about how we're not going to be able to fry that fish unless we have a democratic system, a democratic process in place to ensure that the will of the people is effectively communicated to lawmakers. And you're not gonna get healthcare policy, you're not gonna get economic policies that benefit the best interests of the electorate if you have dark money pouring into these campaigns and if you continue to protect this system of legalized bribery. And if you think it was a problem before, just consider the fact that elections are going to become more and more difficult considering all of these anti-voter bills that are passing in places like Georgia that make it increasingly difficult for voters to cast their ballot. So this is an important piece of legislation because it at least begins to address the core problem that we've noticed in our democracy since the Supreme Court ruled in Buckley v. Vallejo, and then of course that subsequent ruling on Citizens United. We do not have a sound democratic process right now because it is being undermined by money in politics. So if you actually want something done about all those other agenda items, including healthcare and the economy, you're not gonna actually get what you want unless you do away with that virus, you do away with that system of legalized bribery.
So, the science that goes into divide and conquer, it's amazing to listen to it, right? To hear, because that's what it is. The term billionaire conservative and billionaire liberal to me just sounds crazy because I don't believe that you're either a liberal or conservative. If you're a billionaire, you just align yourself with whichever agenda is gonna make you more money. Because I just think that being able to sit on that much money, knowing all of the problems of the world has to speak to a certain type of psyche. And me, I wouldn't be me if I didn't do me. I'm sitting here looking at this stuff and I think about it from the perspective of people of color, Black people in this country. The world, America, they had to give up one of their greatest resources that was free labor. They gave it up and every single day they work hard trying to figure out a way to get back to that. And that prison industrial complex, and it just sounds like a bunch of bitter, rich white people that are in their fields because they don't have an opportunity to exploit the American people in a way that makes them money, so that they can continue passing that money on to their children and their children's children while our children starve and get shot in the street. So I just think that when I hear these stories and I hear this kind of stuff and I read about this kind of stuff, just sounds like a great temper tantrum for people who are sitting fat based on the work of hundreds of years of people that were kidnapped. And now they're like, how do we do this again? And people think it's extreme and they think I'm a conspiracy theorist. But if you don't look at the way that America is running right now and how it's trying to work its way back into slavery, and that the American people have always been a casualty of this toxic capitalism, I don't know what else to tell you, man. This sounds gross and disgusting. And the fact that he's so monotone and having this conversation lets you know that is just robotic and scientific and it's economic. What is not is moral. It is not humane. It is not rooted in anything that has compassion or empathy for the people of this country. It is all based on manipulation. And we need to really be awake because it's just happening before our very own eyes.
Absolutely, absolutely. The manipulation is just part and parcel of what this whole conversation is about. And just to remind you all, I really want to drive this point home. This is an incredibly important piece of legislation. It must pass. The New York Times called it the most substantial expansion of voting rights in a half a century. It would transform the way Americans vote by mandating automatic national voter registration, expanding vote by mail, and transferring basically would prevent Republicans from being able to draw districts or gerrymander the way that they've been doing. And that's incredibly important. It would take that power out of parties and have actual nonpartisan experts make decisions about how districts should be drawn. And that's important as well. So we'll stay on this story, give you guys more details as we learn where the legislation is in the process, but don't be fooled by the nonsense coming from these disgusting billionaire grifters who are, dude, Charles Koch, he's like 110 years old. Like, let it go, go enjoy your wealth, leave us alone, okay? Stop trying to destroy what little we have left of our democratic process.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.